Ethan Miller stumbled into the classroom with his chest heaving, sweat dampening his hair, and his sneakers caked with mud from the long run across town. His backpack sagged on his small shoulders, more burden than it should ever be for an 11-year-old. He kept his head low as every pair of eyes in the room turned to stare at him. Some kids smirked, others rolled their eyes. Ethan's voice came out barely above a whisper, carrying the weight of shame and exhaustion. "I'm sorry for being late." The teacher sighed heavily, frustration lacing her tone as she reminded him for the third time that week that school started at 8 a.m., not whenever he managed to show up. To the other kids, it was just another tardy. To Ethan, it was another crack in the fragile life he was trying so hard to hold together. Before I continue this story, let me ask you something. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that prove humanity still exists, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to the world. Ethan lived in a rundown part of Dayton, Ohio, where rows of aging houses leaned into each other like weary old men. His father had died of a heart attack 2 years earlier, leaving his mother to raise 3 kids alone. Bills stacked up like bricks, eviction notices came every other month, and the cupboards were often bare. Every morning before school, Ethan worked at a small auto shop on the edge of town. His hands, still too small to grip a wrench properly, were always smeared with oil and grease. He swept floors, carried tools, and sometimes stayed long enough to miss breakfast. He did it because his younger sister and baby brother needed food, and his mother, who suffered from chronic back pain, couldn't hold down steady work. That morning, he had stayed late at the shop to beg the owner for an advance. Their gas bill was overdue again, and the utility company had already shut off the heat twice that winter. With Ohio's bitter cold creeping in, Ethan knew his family wouldn't survive another night without warmth. By the time he left the shop with a few wrinkled bills in his pocket, the school bell had already rung. That was why he was late again. That was why he stood in front of his classmates with his cheeks burning, ashamed to explain. What Ethan didn't know was that outside the schoolyard, a man in a sleek black Cadillac had paused. His name was Robert Anderson, a millionaire businessman who had built a real estate empire across Ohio. He had come to meet a contractor about a property nearby, but something about the sight of that little boy sprinting breathless into school caught his attention. Moments later, when he overheard Ethan's trembling apology, it struck him in a place he thought had long gone cold. Ethan sat at his desk, trying to focus on fractions while his stomach twisted in hunger. His classmates whispered about his worn-out shoes, about the faint smell of engine oil clinging to his clothes. He pressed his pencil harder into the paper, pretending not to hear. His mind wasn't on math, it was on whether his mom would have enough strength to cook dinner that night, and whether his siblings would go to bed hungry again. When the bell rang, Ethan darted out before the others could shove or tease him. But just as he stepped outside, a tall man in a tailored suit approached. Robert Anderson bent down slightly and asked his name. Ethan froze, unsure why a stranger like this wanted anything to do with him. Robert didn't push. He simply asked if he could walk with him for a bit. Hesitant but too polite to refuse, Ethan nodded. They walked through cracked sidewalks and past shuttered storefronts until they reached Ethan's small, weather-beaten house. The front steps sagged, the paint peeled, and the yard was littered with old toys his siblings had long outgrown. Inside, the smell of dampness hung heavy, and on a worn couch sat Ethan's mother, pale and coughing. Robert felt something shift inside him. He had grown up in Cleveland's rougher neighborhoods, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. He remembered what it was like to feel invisible, to have people assume you'd never be more than another struggling kid. Seeing Ethan's world was like looking into a mirror of his own forgotten past. Over the next few days, Robert found himself unable to stop thinking about the boy. He came back quietly, bringing groceries one day and medicine the next. Ethan's mother was hesitant at first, pride keeping her from accepting too much. But Robert's kindness was steady, never pitying. Soon, Ethan began to open up. He confessed that he loved math, that he dreamed of becoming a civil engineer, and that he wanted to design bridges strong enough to withstand the floods that often washed out the smaller towns nearby. His eyes lit up when he spoke, though his voice carried the fatigue of a boy stretched too thin. Robert knew then what he had to do. He arranged for Ethan and his siblings to be enrolled in a better school, one with after-school programs and supportive teachers. He covered their fees anonymously, insisting only that Ethan keep working hard. He also set up a monthly stipend for the family so Ethan wouldn't have to keep working at the auto shop. But more than that, he gave Ethan something no one else had given him in years: permission to be a child again. He looked him in the eyes and said, "You'll never have to apologize for being late again. From now on, your time is yours, to learn, to grow, to dream." That night, Ethan lay in bed with tears on his cheeks, but for the first time in years they weren't tears of fear or frustration. They were tears of relief. He clutched the math workbook Robert had bought him and whispered a quiet promise to himself, that he would make the most of this chance. Months passed. Ethan's grades soared, his teachers noticed his brilliance, and his classmates began to respect him. No longer the late, quiet kid with greasy hands, he became the boy who solved problems no one else could. Robert mentored him, telling him stories of his own struggles, reminding him that hardship could be the fuel for greatness if you refused to give up. Years rolled by. Ethan earned a full scholarship to the Ohio State University, where he studied civil engineering. He worked harder than anyone, driven not just by ambition but by gratitude. Every late night in the library, every complex equation he solved, he carried with him the memory of that day when he had whispered, "I'm sorry for being late," and a man had stepped in to change his life forever. When the acceptance letter arrived, Ethan brought it home to his mother. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper, tears spilling down her cheeks as she read aloud the words her son had dreamed of hearing. The little boy who once carried grease on his hands and shame in his heart was now stepping into a future brighter than he ever dared imagine. Robert stood in the corner, watching quietly, pride swelling in his chest. He had closed countless business deals, built skyscrapers, and accumulated wealth beyond measure. But none of it compared to this, the simple, unshakable joy of knowing he had helped change the course of one boy's life. Years later, Ethan became a civil engineer just as he had dreamed. He designed bridges across Ohio and beyond, structures that stood tall against storms and symbolized resilience. But he never forgot where he came from. He often returned to Dayton, speaking at schools and community centers, telling kids who were struggling that their current circumstances didn't define their future. And always, standing in the back, Robert Anderson watched with quiet pride. He had once thought success was measured in profits and power. Now he knew it was measured in lives changed, in dreams restored, in the spark of hope rekindled in a boy's eyes. Dear viewer, if this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support ensures that more stories of compassion and humanity reach the world. Together, we can remind people that kindness still exists. Sparkles, and before you go, I have one special request. Please leave a comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," to spread this message of hope even further.